welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and we're recording on a weekend, which means either we forgot we needed another episode, or it's the international break, and today it's the former and not the latter, thankfully. Last night, the U.S. men's national team drew 1-1 in their friendly with Ecuador, with a second-half equalizer by Balogun, making the crowd in Austin, and I assume my co-host at home, go nuts. Joe Lowry, I thought it was nice of Balogun to dedicate that goal to you, his longtime stan, if we're still using that term. We almost certainly are not. But you have always believed in Balogun, and I feel like a lot of other people do right now.
It just feels good, man. You do this long enough, and I'm learning this over time. You have a lot of takes that age very poorly, and you just sort of sweep those under the rug and hope that nobody goes back to dig them up. And every once in a while, you have a few that age really well. And so occasionally, you have to pay your friends to talk about those so that you can sound really smart. And so, Taylor, the check is in the mail. Thank you very much.
I mean, I definitely was starting to kind of shift into the maybe Pepe would be very fun for the U.S., and that might still be the case.
Yeah, sure.
But I think this game, and we'll talk more about it in myriad ways, showcased what Balogun brings into this team. There's the individual kind of turn and sprint very early in this game, but then there's good runs in behind, there's good link-up play, there's just smart little 5 and 10-yard sprints to open up space for other teammates or to get himself into good positions. I thought he was one of several very good performers on the evening.
Yeah, so fun to watch Balogun. I basically stopped writing down all of the moments of good link play that he had in the first half and just started writing, his link play has been consistently good throughout this game so far. It starts so early on in this match, and despite his frame, you're standing next to Florin Balogun, you talk to him in a mix zone or you're around him for whatever reason, he's not a big guy. He's not a physically imposing dude, he's not especially tall, he's not especially broad, and yet his ability to not just hang with, but to actually win battles over center backs that are much larger than he is. We saw that over and over again in this game. We've seen it in Liga. It is something that has really improved, I think, in his game as he's gotten more minutes as a striker in a system that isn't just straight up releasing him in behind like it was during his breakout year in Liga. I thought he was very good in this game. Not flawless, of course, but really, really good. And you see it all in basically every facet of play. And nice that he gets the goal. That's goals in back-to-back games for him.
Goals in back-to-back games indeed. The U.S. playing this game on the 5-year anniversary of their failure to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. So
nice.
We at least knew going in that no matter what happened, no result would be as painful as that one in Trinidad. But instead, I thought this game was pretty positive. I think we saw some strong individual performances, some clear patterns of play and positional rotation, but then some good individual attacking moments, some fun, hard-nosed play as well. And what I kept picturing, because Ecuador are such a strong team, and I can do some table setting on that one in a bit, this felt like it could be a knockout round opponent. It could be representative of a stronger group stage opponent. And so watching this game from we're playing in a World Cup, we need to get a goal back, how are we going to do it? I think there was a lot to really like about this performance, from the effort and the intensity, but then the technical play, some good defensive work, some nice goalkeeping as well. I feel like it made me feel more positive about the U.S. at a World Cup than I have felt in quite some time.
I love that framing, Taylor, of thinking about this as sort of a World Cup game. This is a possible pot 2 opponent for the U.S. The U.S. will be a pot 1 team along with Canada and Mexico next summer. And so this is a team in Ecuador who would be in that second bracket of teams. And this could be a potential draw for the U.S. in a World Cup setting. So this is a realistic game that is a real test to see how the U.S. can operate in a World Cup. Now, one other facet that relates to that is Tim Weah in the pregame with TNT talked about how, often in friendlies it can be difficult to manufacture the energy that you sort of feel like you need because everybody knows deep down that it doesn't matter in terms of the result. You're not living and dying by the result in these games. And to the U.S.'s credit, and to Ecuador's as well, there was a lot of intensity. I mean, Ecuador, I think, were probably the better team in the first 5 minutes of this game, pressing the U.S. high. The U.S. didn't do a great job of getting out of the pressure. But the U.S. fought back and were probably the better team for the other 85 minutes or so of this game. I mean, the U.S. played a really good game, a high-intensity game. There was good energy. They looked committed to this match. And I think a lot of the individual players thrived within the setup that Pochettino rolled out in this game. So there was a lot to like. We talked about it before we started recording. I think this is pretty clearly the best game that the U.S. have played under Pochettino. I would put it past the Japan game from the last window, because I think this is a better Ecuador group maybe than the Japan lineup that we saw for most of that game. Although we should note both the U.S. and Ecuador missing key players for this match. But there was a lot to like about the U.S. I straight up thought they were the better team against a good Ecuador side. Granted, again, not a full-strength one, but there's a lot to be appreciated even about that concept in itself.
It's fair to say, though, from what we understand of Ecuador, though, that the U.S. you could argue missing at least 4 starters. Ecuador missing probably the 2, right, in Capié and Caicedo. Caicedo, a huge one. Yeah.
Yes, 2 certain starters. Another couple players who I think didn't start their last CONMEBOL qualifying game. But both teams were certainly missing pieces. I think the argument for Ecuador is that Caicedo would have been the best player on the field in a way that even Christian Pulisic would not quite be a game changer. But I'm willing to call that a wash. Like, I'm willing to say both of these teams were at the same level relative to their normal lineups. And so that the U.S. looked better in this game despite it just being a 1-1 draw is a really encouraging thing for them.
Yeah. And I want to do a little more table setting because if you haven't been paying attention to the U.S., you haven't been paying attention to World Cup qualifying, Ecuador feels like a team that we meet consistently. Like when we played in Centenario, we met them there. I think we played them in a friendly ahead of that. It feels like we play them a fair amount, and I think I often tend to think of them as a team that the U.S. should be beating or will be difficult, but isn't like that top-tier team. And that's fair because in CONMEBOL you've got Brazil, Argentina, you've got Colombia, you've got Uruguay. And yet, Ecuador finished ahead of all but Argentina in World Cup qualifying. They finished second in South America, and they did so, I believe, conceding the fewest number of goals across those 18 games. They only conceded 5. They had the fewest number of losses. They got wins over Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia along the way. They did score the fewest goals of any qualified team and had the most draws, which tells me they're a strong defensive team who are going to work hard, play physical, and spring some surprises. And they did all of that on Friday. So for the U.S. to then come away with the draw, lacking key starters and still kind of figuring some things out and experimenting along the way, I think largely this is just a pure positive for me. Some things to grow on, some things we could learn about, some players who could have done better. But overall, I'm pretty optimistic, Joe.
Yeah, Taylor, I'm in that exact same boat. I don't think the entire U.S. fan base has had a moment to rally quite like this game, which I know sounds maybe a bit silly after a draw like that. But this was a legitimately good performance. Again, it was not a perfect performance. We'll talk about some of the negatives that were here. But there have been so many downs in this time under Pochettino. So many moments where it doesn't seem like he's picking rosters that make a whole lot of sense. So many moments where the players aren't performing, and maybe that sparks some of Pochettino's roster changing to make it very clear that nobody's spot is safe heading into the World Cup. And now it feels like we're sort of coming out the other side of that, where no, this is not the full World Cup roster because there are so many players who are still out injured. But we're getting closer and closer to this looking like a real soccer team, like a real version of the U.S. that we could actually see. And to get so many relatively positive performances in a game like this. I mean, we'll talk about Malik Tillman in more detail later. I said in our preview show for this window, is this going to be the window where Malik Tillman really establishes himself? He was awesome in this game. There were folks joking in the Discord because they know I've been harsh on Malik Tillman in the past. I don't think unjustly so, but there were folks talking about how good he was and sort of daring me to point out all of his flaws and bring them back down to earth. I'm not going to. He was really good in this game. That is not a question fully answered because it is one game, but it is a very positive data point towards an actual answer to the question of can Malik Tillman be another key player for this U.S. team in the final third. I think there were so many of those sorts of positive talking points, so many positive on-field performances that it's hard not to feel encouraged by what we've seen from the U.S. Now, not just in this game, but if we want to take it back to September, for maybe the last chunk of the South Korea game, although I still think there were some flaws there defensively, but certainly the Japan game, and now this game, that's a nice little chunk of on-field action where the U.S. have looked good against different opponents in different setups, and that's a positive.
Absolutely. And I avoided a lot of the discourse around the team after full time and went and rewatched. And then even today, as I was writing like my notes and prepping for this show, I did a lot of like that work I just read out about Ecuador because I wanted to kind of remind everybody this is a very strong Ecuador team. We should be optimistic about this, sort of anticipating that the feeling would be generally like, it's another draw against Ecuador. Like, who cares? We got to get better. And then finally, just before recording, was looking at some comments and was really pleased that the vibe seems to be as positive as we are, maybe even more so. And maybe now we're even like into maybe we need to calm it down a little bit territory. But to see people being excited about this team, excited about Poch, made me very happy because, again, I think there was just a lot to like about this performance. And it wasn't perfect. We're just going to keep dancing around that one. But it just, you could see aspects of what they were trying to do. You could see more connection between the team. I do think you could see a little bit of competitive fight. As you said, friendlies are not always the place where you're going to see players really pushing themselves. I think that's evidenced by when Balogun scores the equalizer. There's like almost no reaction, almost no celebration from him or Tillman. They're just like, yeah, okay, give me the ball. Let's do it again. But I think within that, you could just see that some players knew this was their chance to prove that they deserved a spot. Some players were trying to prove that they deserved a spot again. And then some players were trying to prove that they deserved the spot that they had earned. And so I think you could just see some of that fight and some of that familiarity coming home for the United States. So I would say those are the big picture opening thoughts, Joe. Let's get into the team itself, shall we? When I see the 11 listed, it's listed as a back three, and it felt for the moment like, oh, we all saw this coming. We got it right, except it wasn't Mark McKenzie, who I think, did you have Mark McKenzie starting?
I'm sure I did. Yeah, I think he would be my next center back after Richards and Ream.
It was you and me, and then Graham had CCV.
Classic.
We were all wrong. It was Miles Robinson playing as part of a back three, but really, Joe, not quite a back three / back five.
Yeah, when I saw the lineup drop with Chris Richards, Tim Ream, and Miles Robinson all in the team, it seemed like, okay, here's going to be a continuation from the Japan game where we saw 3 center backs and 2 outside backs in that team. And this kind of makes sense because we just saw it and it seemed to work fairly well. So Pochettino's running it back. That's really not what this was at all. This was effectively the same setup that the U.S. has been running for almost every game outside of the Japan game and one of the early matches where Joe Scally played as sort of a true right back pushing forward into the attack. This was, bar those games, effectively the same setup the U.S. has been running, which was they were defending in a 4-4-2, and Miles Robinson played out of position sort of as a right back in defense. And so they defended in that 4-4-2. Poch called it a 4-2-3-1 post-game, whatever. And then in possession, they moved into the same 3-2-5 structure that they've been using for almost every game, including that Japan game. So it was just a fluid setup where you have the 4-4-2 in defense, the 3-2-5 in attack. There were some.
Why are you dismissing the 4-2-3-1 versus the 4-4-2?
Well, it seems like those are basically the same thing. It's just the positioning of the number 10, right, as to how you describe that shape. And to me, honestly, it looked like a 4-4-2 when I watched this team defend. So it's like saying a 5-2-3 or a 3-4-3 or a 5-4-1. It's all the exact same thing. It's just however the person wants to describe it in the moment. It really doesn't make a huge difference. Maybe it does, but. This was effectively the same setup that the U.S. had used, and so all of us, myself included, got out a little over our skis. And I even saw some people in their post-game write-ups, media folks that were covering this game on the ground, kind of continued to buy into the fact that it was just a back three setup, and that's just not quite true in this game. Really, it was fluid. It was a lot of continuity from what we've seen for most of Pochettino's tenure. So Miles Robinson effectively was that pivot player shifting between right center back in possession and right back in defense. Tim Weah, us Tim Weah at right wing back folks have got to continue to stay in the trenches because we haven't quite seen it yet.
Yeah, we saw it. I think so. What I would say, I think defensively when they were defending higher or around midfield, I did see more of that 4-2-3-1. I think as soon as Ecuador crossed midfield or were in stronger positions, then it was more of a 4-4-2, and then you would even see Weah drop deeper into a back five at times in defense. But to your point, that's also a thing that you're going to see regularly when the right midfielder just tracks their mark all the way back and then might be part of a back five very briefly. But I think what another interesting kind of variation within that is that you had Miles Robinson as your right center back, but really your right back, and did a lot of the stay-at-home work that we've maybe come to expect from that position. But then when you have Freeman come on, I felt like he did a good variety between the two of still staying back at times, but then also aggressively getting forward. And we see, in my mind, a way in which Dest might be used if we are sort of going against a team that is more defensive or we feel like is there for the taking. Maybe that's Dest starting and pushing on and getting into more attacking positions. But it might also be against a stronger opponent. We're just putting in another center back, and it's going to be a more defensive team that focuses on defending first, and then if we get a goal on a set piece or a counterattack, so be it. But again, it gives us different looks for different opponents, and I'm not sure we've had that level of planning and clarity in a while.
Yeah, that's exactly my thought, Taylor, as to why Poch uses this personnel grouping with Robinson. I mean, Miles Robinson is sort of a clunky fit to play that right back, right center back role. He's got a lot of speed. He's probably FC Cincinnati's fastest player. He's able to go and track back. And so in that way, he makes sense as an edge defender. But he's not a guy who's going to give you a ton on the ball as an outside center back. And he's not going to be a guy who is super comfortable defending 1v1 all the way out wide as a pure right back. So in some ways, he is kind of a strange fit for that spot. But I think you're spot on there with Pochettino looking at Ecuador as a team that they had to take seriously and putting out a lineup with a bunch of adults in it, right? I mean, Alex Freeman is eligible for this game. He starts it on the bench, and Robinson gets that start over him. And Robinson is the more professional defender of those two players. He is somebody who you feel a little bit better at when he's isolated and when he is deeper downfield defending, even pinching into the box. That makes sense to me. And one other area where it seems like Pochettino pushed towards having a bigger, more defensively oriented body in the team is using Weston McKennie in the front line, right? Where McKennie pressed in this game as part of that front two, where he was the number 10 behind Balogun, depending on how you view the defensive shape. But he was high defensively. And then in possession, he was one of those dual number 10s with Malik Tillman underneath Fuller and Balogun in that 3-2-5 structure. And so McKennie was playing quite high up the field as well, which is not new for Pochettino. We've seen that before. We saw that in McKennie's last camp with the U.S. That was all the way back in March now. We saw it in the start against Panama, where McKennie gets that game from the jump, and he is also playing in the front line in the exact same 3-2-5 setup. It seems like Poch rates him there, but it also seems like maybe McKennie gets the start in that spot because it gives the U.S. another big-bodied midfielder, even higher up the field, to help control the game and lose fewer of those physical battles against a very physical Ecuador team. I think Poch was maybe trialing this overall setup with a center back playing a little bit wider on that right side of the defense and with another bigger-bodied player higher up in the attack, testing that out as a way to maybe have that in the back pocket when you end up coming against a really, really good team in a World Cup setting.
Did you like that test?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I think overall the U.S. did not cede a ton of chances to Ecuador. So defensively, the U.S. seemed to do well in this game. And I think it is something that if you tweak the midfield personnel slightly, and I don't know if Robinson is exactly the right player for that right back, right center back role or not. I'm not against it necessarily. But overall, the U.S. are the better team in this game. I think the setup works fine.
There we go. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the lineup itself. We'll talk about some big moments, some individual performances, and maybe take a look at Australia to come. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. We hope you're all still feeling optimistic about the USA's 1-1 draw/win over Ecuador. I'm just going to make it a win in my mind. Joe, let's run through the actual starting 11. We get Matt Friis in goal. Not a surprise, but it does still give us like another data point. And I thought he was really strong in the moments that he needed to be. He has that one catch where he comes off his line and handles it comfortably. When maybe if he spills that, there's a lot of uncertainty and chaos. So Matt Friis in goal, thumbs up for me.
Yeah, Matt Friis continues to be Pochettino's number one. I wasn't really surprised by that. I don't imagine we're going to see that change anytime soon. He was in goal. As far as the rest of this U.S. lineup, we've started to dig into it a little bit. But defensively, I'm going to read out sort of the defensive shape in this game. It was Miles Robinson defending as that right back, as we talked about. It was Chris Richards and Tim Ream from right to left as the center back pairing. It was Max Arfsten as that left back. In central midfield, it was Aiden Morris and Tanner Tessman as the double pivot. You had Tim Weah defending as the right-sided midfielder. You had Malik Tillman defending as the left-sided midfielder. And then you had Weston McKennie maybe shaded slightly underneath Fuller and Balogun. But those two players were up top for the U.S. And the only thing that shifted about that structure in possession was that Robinson stayed home, like we talked about, as that right center back. The other two guys stayed back with him in the middle of that back line. Weah was the width provider on the right. Arfsten was the width provider on the left. And then you had McKennie and Tillman in the half spaces underneath Balogun. It was a very familiar structure. And I think, Taylor, you saw the benefits of that. And I think we're seeing some continuity and some chemistry continue to build with this U.S. group where I mentioned it already. I thought Malik Tillman was really good in this game. A lot of his bright moments came from him looking very comfortable in that left half space where he would drop in a little bit, get on the ball. He would pull an Ecuadorian defender with him. Balogun would then sort of teeter-totter in behind where Tillman drops, Balogun goes high. Balogun would run in behind and Tillman could find him. Or later on in the first half, you had McKennie playing that lovely ball in behind to Balogun. It looked like, especially with that front three, even though they haven't played a lot of minutes together, it looked like those three players understood what their roles were supposed to be. There was a lot of fluidity, maybe not with them rotating horizontally, right? I mean, we did see some of that, but more when one player would drop, the other one would go in behind, and the timing of the movement off the ball and the quality of the deliveries on the ball between those three players, I thought were all excellent in this game.
Yeah, I did too. I think my one negative feeling coming out of this game was just that this team, and maybe it's not even a negative, it's just kind of practical reality. I think this team was set up to defend first and make life difficult for Ecuador. And then, as I said, if we can find a way through with 3, maybe 4 attackers, then good on us. But I think you could see that in the way there weren't the numbers like fully committed to the attack. And I think that starts with Tessman and Morris as your double pivot. It felt like at times both of them were content to kind of dish the ball off to somebody else and then keep their shape and maybe venture forward. But we didn't see like an all-out commitment to attack. And not even that we should have necessarily. It just became pretty evident to me that we are reliant on individuals or combinations from a few players to make something happen. And I think that can happen against maybe perceived weaker opposition or teams that are a little bit disorganized along the back line. But against anybody who has kind of a set way of defending, I think the U.S. does have to kick it up a notch. Not even saying that that was a thing that they were trying to do in this game necessarily, given some of the absences, given that I think they were setting up to defend and frustrate. But I did find myself just a little bit, not bored quite, but just sort of like, and not even frustrated, but just wanting more from the attack, wanting more numbers in there. And I think we got that in the final 20 minutes, and that's when the U.S., I thought, looked most comfortable, and Ecuador, by contrast, looked most uncomfortable.
I'm warmer on the U.S.'s attacking play for most of this game than you are, it sounds like, Taylor. I think there was room for more. Don't get me wrong about that. But I thought the U.S. struck a fairly good balance in this game between having a lineup that is tilted slightly towards the defensive side of the ball, at least with the double pivot being a fairly conservative one, and with Miles Robinson, as we talked about, as that sort of right outside back in this game. It is a lineup that is tilted a little bit more towards that end. You could have seen instead Weston McKennie in the double pivot and another attacker in that front line. It could have been Luna and Tillman. We should mention that Pulisic was not 100% fit for this game, so that's why he doesn't start. He ends up coming off the bench. He's dealing with an ankle injury. Alex Zendejas also not healthy for this game, not even on the bench. And Jedi Robinson as well, not healthy, which is not a surprise given that he hasn't been playing for Fulham. So those three players were missing, and at least two of them, probably in Pulisic and Robinson, would have started in this game. But even still, we could have seen McKennie start a little bit deeper downfield and drop either Morris or Tessman from that double pivot, and then you put Luna on into the attacking line with Tillman, and then you have a little bit more attacking quality. But that comes with a trade-off, obviously, and I know you're not ignoring that, but that comes with the Weston McKennie wandering effect that you get at times in central midfield, and you're a little lighter in that part of the field. And we already saw the U.S. at times still struggle to deal with Ecuador playing in behind or playing vertically through central midfield. We see it on the goal that Enner Valencia scores. Aiden Morris makes a gamble and it doesn't pay off, and then Tim Ream does nothing and Chris Richards gets isolated, and all of a sudden Ecuador are up 1-0. I think Pochettino was reasonable with his lineup, and I think the attacking players put together plenty of really quite nice sequences to make that balance pay off and to make it something that really I wouldn't even mind seeing again, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, and I think that is a fair rebuttal, because like it was a good performance. They did create, they dominate possession, they dominate chances, I think, and in the second half I think looked more likely, especially once they equalized, they looked more likely to be the team that would go on to win it. I think like this is not breaking new ground to say that the US don't have world-class attackers, but I think that was clear to me that even with good individual moments and good runs and good communication and good kind of quick little passes through and good little possession exchanges, ultimately they still just lack that difference maker, that Erling Haaland or like Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., whatever, like those which are world-class players. And I think Pulisic is probably the player who is closest to that for the United States, and that he's not there immediately makes it harder to have that impact. But this game I think was crying out for one person to kind of take on a defender and make them look foolish, and then Ecuador have to worry about that. And now they have to maybe cheat another defender over, and that opens up space for somebody else. And I think the U.S. at times just looked cautious, and I think there are understandable and justifiable reasons for that, sure, from a game plan perspective to an individual quality perspective to a not wanting to get punished perspective. But I think that's the thing I would most like to see against Australia. And I'll spoil it here to say I think the U.S. is going to beat Australia comfortably. And that is not arrogance. That is not me like overrating the U.S. and underrating Australia. It's that I saw a lot of stuff in this game that did not work, but was very clearly intentional and was just maybe 1 second too slow, 2 seconds too slow. Some of the rotations were off. Sometimes the player got too committed forward and then had to take a little bit too much time to drop into a position where he was supposed to be for possession. But once they did, the ball went to him, he would carry it forward, and you could see those patterns there. And I think against Australia, a team that we would assume are going to be similar to Ecuador, and they will be more defensive, they will be physical, they will look to hit on the break, and they will be direct at times. I think it's an opportunity for the U.S. to play with even more confidence, to have a little bit more attacking freedom and creativity, and I think they win this game, not like 5-0 or anything like that, but I won't be surprised if the U.S. score first. I won't even be surprised if they concede first, but end up winning 3-1 or something like that, or 2-0. I think there was enough from this game that had me excited for the next one and excited to see how we progress from here. But I think it also did show me where we need to progress both individually and as a unit.
Yeah, somehow I'm like more afraid of Australia than you are, and also higher on how the U.S. played in this game than you are. Maybe that means we actually agree on all this. I don't know.
It has nothing to do with Australia, truthfully. It has nothing to do with them like not being as good as I thought or whatever. It is just there's a moment when I wrote it down. I think it's in the second half. I will find it at some point when I'm not trying to find it on the fly. But it's basically like the U.S. has possession in the back line. They've kind of advanced it. Then they've pulled possession back, and now the center backs have it. And there's just this like wait and wait and wait. And then suddenly Tillman comes running into frame. He drops like 30 yards and moves into like the right center back position. And then the ball goes to him, and then he moves it forward and I think plays a direct ball in for Weah maybe. But that was very clearly a like, okay, like you were too far forward and now you've got to cycle back because Aiden Morris was here, but he moved into the midfield and you're supposed to automatically cycle in when he's gone. So we just got to wait a second. And I think those kind of patterns become more automatic the more practice you have with them and the more confidence you gain with them. And so it's more so that type of thing where I think if that's a little bit more automatic and happens a little bit faster, I think there's just more consistency in the attack and probably more chances generated as a result.
I agree with that. Absolutely. I think that's a totally fair point, Taylor. I think there was a lot of good stuff in this game from the U.S. in the attack, and maybe we are just agreeing on that straight up. I think about a few of the moments that I really enjoyed from the front three. There is that, I mentioned it already, it's the McKennie ball in first half stoppage time where he just one touches a through ball to Balogun in behind. It's a delightful bit of skill from Weston McKennie. Like that is, to me, Taylor, you were talking about where are the game-breaking players to create those game-breaking moments. That was a game-breaking moment, I think, from Weston McKennie, where there's another world in which that turns into a golden opportunity, maybe even a goal for the U.S. It's a delightful ball. I think about in the 28th minute with Malik Tillman, he plays a scrumptious outside of the boot ball to McKennie. Yeah, right? It's in the first half, and you see such quality from Tillman over and over again, both on dead balls, by the way, where he was a real asset. The Tillman-Richards combination on set pieces was really fruitful for the U.S. Good thing when Christian Pulisic came on, he just ripped those away from Tillman and got to just bang balls to the near post again and again and again. I'm really glad that we got to see that before the game was out. We can't have anything nice, truly, as USMNT watchers. But Tillman, I thought, delivered multiple of those game-breaking moments on dead balls and also had some really, really delightful distribution and combination on that left side. I think if you were looking at areas where the U.S. needed to be better in this game, because there were, I think it's the double pivot that really did end up letting the U.S. down at times in this match, and it was better in the second half. I don't know if Pochettino kind of laid into Aiden Morris and Tanner Tessman a little bit, but I thought Tessman had a really nice second half. I thought Morris had an okay second half. There were some good moments, but really those two players were not anonymous in the first half because I think Morris had some dicey moments. But Tessman was basically anonymous, and Morris was noticeable because he wasn't playing very well, at least in my mind. And maybe I need to triple watch this game and just watch it for Aiden Morris, and I'll see some more stuff that I didn't fully appreciate the first time. But 10th minute, Morris loses the ball in midfield after Ream plays him a somewhat tricky ball, but you would still like your deepest midfielder to work his way out of that. 14th minute, turnover with a sloppy pass. 18th minute, he gets bypassed in transition defense, easy for me to say. That leads to Richards ending up with that yellow card for his foul on Yeboah. 45th minute, stoppage time, he does have a nice moment arriving late in the box, but it is more bad than good for Morris, certainly in that first half. And he is also out of position, as we mentioned, on the Ecuador goal. I thought the U.S. lacked progression and lacked consistency from their double pivot, and Morris in particular. He's supposed to add bite defensively, and he had some nice moments in this game against the ball. 62nd minute, tracks back to win the ball alongside with Chris Richards, and Poch gets amped about that on the sideline.
I need to pause here to say, because Joe is correct, but I need to add, 62nd minute he tracked back and won that ball. Like, that was a hell of a tackle and a hell of a run, and it is a note I have in there of like, well, Morris just became one of Poch's guys. You're totally right with everything you said, Joe, but I feel like that moment alone had Poch be like, yes, that is the fight and tenacity I need from somebody to come on in the 89th minute when we are trying to see out a 1-0 lead and is going to work his socks off, but ideally not be easily bypassed in build-up at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Morris is he's a dog, man. Like, I value that about Aiden Morris, and you could see it in this game. He was like an overeager dog at times in this game against the ball, and you can't have that against a team like Ecuador. And when that player's not bringing you almost anything in possession, it becomes a problem because then at that point all you're getting is pure effort and grit. and there's guys who can give you some effort and grit and also do something else on the field. So I'm not saying I don't want Morris in a U.S. roster. I'm not saying I don't want him to get any minutes next time out against Australia. I'm fine to see more of Aiden Morris. But it seemed like if the U.S. was lacking something in this game, in possession especially, it was that their double pivot didn't turn it on until the second half, and even then, really, it was just sort of Tanner Tessman that turned it on.
If I'm gonna like try to bridge that gap, because I enjoyed that double pivot a little bit more, but I enjoyed it with the idea, and I am not saying I am correct in this one, but my assumption hypothesis is that they were instructed, like, don't take risks, don't lose the ball, don't give it away cheaply in midfield, and to your point, Morris is still maybe not fully effective at that one. But this just felt for me all the world like get the ball to the creative players and then stay home. And if that was their remit, if that was what they were asked to do, I'm not then going to criticize them for not being better in possession and better in facilitating attacking play. But if we see that again and they've clearly been asked to do more, or in the second game, if they still maybe look like they're working very hard, Morris in particular, if it's a lot of hard work and a lot of that dog energy, but not a lot of that passing energy, then I think I come around to like, okay, we kind of know what he brings this team. Maybe that's valuable depth, but certainly not as a starter. But if we see them be in more advanced positions and moving the ball better, if they do get another start together, then I'm excited to see how they can kind of adapt based on instruction. But if they don't, then I'm inclined to think, okay, maybe it wasn't instruction. Maybe that was just some limitations in their, specifically Morris's play. Because overall, I thought Tessman was fine. I think Tessman is probably in the U.S. squad for the World Cup at this point. I don't think he's the starter. I think he did a lot of what was asked. And maybe I'm being discourteous to him, Joe, but I thought it was a fine, positive performance, but I don't have a ton of notes on him.
Yeah, second half, I thought Tessman turned into a really valuable piece of this U.S. team. 53rd minute has a nice cross when he gets high and wide on that right side. 86th minute has a really nice clipped ball into the forward line. He was just getting more involved in the second 45, Tessman, which again is sort of why I'm thinking maybe Poch had some words with him and Morris in that second half. Okay. I think even to zoom out slightly from these two guys, who I think I've made my positions fairly clear on them at this point, so I don't have a ton more on those guys.
You hate Aiden Morris. It's pretty cool.
Exactly, yep. I mean, I got to stay consistent with something, Taylor. Come on. I think in Pochettino's eyes, this is this game and this lineup was a realization that for him, it seems like Tessman and Morris are above James Sands and Christian Roldan in the midfield depth chart, right? If we're going to try, I mean, time is running out for Pochettino to make these sorts of decisions. So every lineup, I think we should look at as being quite telling at this stage. To think about this in how it leads the U.S. to the World Cup. If Pochettino is giving minutes against a good Ecuador team, one that we talked about already is a good test for the U.S. ahead of next summer, I think it's telling that he gives those minutes to those two guys, and that James Sands, who still has not had a minute for Poch so far, is on the bench, and that Roldan's on the bench. I have no issue with that talent ID, by the way. Like, I'm not saying this to poke fun at Poch or to say that I disagree. I think it's just notable that we see that. I think it's notable in this game that we see Malik Tillman start over Diego Luna. That feels relevant and seems like an indicator of how Poch views those two players. I think it is telling that we see Weston McKennie get yet another start higher up the field. And maybe when I'm thinking about my ideal U.S. lineups and how I think Poch will set up, maybe it's time for me to let go of McKennie playing as part of the double pivot for Poch. And it sure seems like a lot of evidence is pointing towards Pochettino viewing him as a more of a number 10 and a player he wants further upfield, which again, I think is probably fine. It's just that's becoming clearer and clearer for Poch so far. So I think we're learning with each lineup, with each game. I think we are getting more information on how Pochettino is setting up his own depth chart.
I do want to take a break, but since you've brought us there, so if it's McKennie staying in a more advanced position, Joe, who sits? Because we would assume Pulisic, when he comes back and is starting, is going to be a starter. Yep. So is that Weah to the bench? Is that Tillman to the bench, or is that somebody playing deeper and McKennie just gets to hang out? What do you think happens?
Or is it McKennie to the bench? Right? I mean, I think ultimately you would see Pulisic be one of the two half-space attackers, and it's probably between Tillman and McKennie, and to a lesser extent, as I detailed, Luna already fighting for that other spot. I mean, Pulisic is definitely that guy, right? Other than that, McKennie was left at home last month, man. Like, it doesn't seem like his status is written in pen right now for the U.S., and Tillman is not a guy who has been so consistent. We've talked about that. He's not consistent, that he's obviously a starter for this team. It seems to me that, at least right now in Poch's eyes, it is a battle between Tillman and McKennie for one starting spot. And when Pulisic isn't healthy, all of a sudden you got two starting spots again, and everybody's happy. But when he is, I think one of those guys is riding the pine.
I know who I would sit, but we'll save that conversation about Tim Weah for after the break. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk some individual performances in the USA's 1-1 draw win over Ecuador. And I'm going to take us to Tim Weah. I teased it at the end of that segment. Joe, I'm starting to be worried. I'm starting to have frustrations. And Tim Weah is a player who, I think years ago I said could be the USA's first, super duper star. It felt like he just possessed so many different qualities and abilities that would make him that next level player. And at this point, I don't know what he brings into the U.S. that makes him head and shoulders above anybody else. And he has difference-making abilities, I believe, but routinely in this game, we see the drawbacks to his game. We see him crossing erratically / regularly failing to clear that first defender. We see a lot of sort of errant shots that go wide or that he gets in the way of. He has the one deflected shot from, I think, Morris when he didn't really need to be there right at the end of the first half. It's a good attacking move from the U.S. Morris shoots from the top of the box after a cutback from Balogun. And then Weah has just kind of run across and it deflects off him and goes out for a goal kick. It wasn't a sharp performance from him at a time when I felt like other players played well or came back in and looked really strong, looked really fit in Weston McKennie's case. And I think the limitations in Weah's game are becoming more apparent to me at a time when I think other players are starting to have their stock boost up a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, Taylor. I didn't think Weah was very good in this game either, and that is a sort of troubling theme for him. It doesn't seem like Poch rates him especially highly.
I don't think Poch knows how to use him. I think he's not clear what is the best way to use Tim Weah.
I think that's a better way to put it, Taylor, because after the last camp, or during the last camp, Pochettino expressed his frustrations that Weah wasn't playing as a winger with Marseille. And let's remember, before that, we'd seen Poch already move Weah from right to left because of that eye dominance thing. So we've seen him on the right side. We've seen him on the left side. Now we've seen him playing back on the right again. And it doesn't seem like, whether he's in the half spaces, which we've seen, or whether he's a little bit wider, which we've also seen and which we saw last night, it doesn't seem like Weah has really found his spot. I love that framing, Taylor. I'm gonna steal that. Under Pochettino. And I think that makes him a player that would be very possible to move to the bench. Now, the reason why I would not move Weah out of the lineup just to get McKennie, Tillman, and Pulisic in the lineup is you still need someone to be a width provider. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to move Weah out of the lineup, that's completely fine. But I'm probably only going to do that for Alex Freeman or Serginho Dest, right? I'm going to do that with somebody who's going to play as the width provider on that right side. Now, Dest is not a traditional wide attacking player because he's Serginho Dest, and who can tame the mighty Dest in terms of where he goes in possession. But really, I think if you're going to take Weah out of this setup for the U.S., the one that we saw last night, I have no issue with that at all. I think it needs to be for another player who is comfortable in those wide areas, and really there isn't another wide attacking player that I want to see for the U.S. other than Dest especially, and I suppose to a lesser extent Freeman, although I would still give Weah those minutes over Freeman. So in a weird way, there's nobody really pushing for that spot other than Dest, and Dest is made of glass at the moment. So I don't know what that's going to look like for the U.S., but I totally agree with you, Taylor, that Weah was uninspiring in this game. He had some good moments, yes, but he was not, for me, near the top of the list of good performers for the U.S. last night. And I think there were some guys that had significantly better games.
If we're playing an opponent who is going to be more defensive, the U.S. is going to have more of the ball, more chances, but will still need to be alive defensively. Who do you trust to stay in the single pivot between Morris and Tessman, but be more defensive at this point?
So, sorry, Taylor, are you saying if the U.S. were to switch to a single pivot, or
No.
who would I want to keep in the double pivot of those two guys?
Who would I want to keep in the double pivot to do more of the defensive work?
I mean, weirdly, I would still sort of say Aiden Morris because he is slightly less adventurous off the ball than Tanner Tessman, but I don't love that answer.
So how would you feel about, I think you've just answered it, but how would you feel then if we keep McKennie in the lineup, we move McKennie back, we sit Tessman on the bench, and so against an Australia team where we need maybe more attacking motivation and some late arriving runs, it's Morris and McKennie with Pulisic, Tillman, and Weah ahead of them.
Yeah, I think that is a very possible outcome for the U.S. I'd be a little surprised if we saw Pulisic start against Australia, given that he doesn't seem to be fully healthy right now. But I'm fine with that lineup, Taylor. I think that accomplishes some of the goal of, okay, you get basically an extra attacker on the field because McKennie, we've seen, can be an impact player when he is higher up in that attacking line. But even under Poch, I mean, I know I kind of made a big deal in the last segment about how Poch might view him as more of a 10 than an 8. Even under Poch, we have seen McKennie play deeper in midfield. We saw it against Canada back in March after he was the 10 against Panama. We saw him become an 8 against Canada. Not that game was good in basically any way, but it's totally possible that we could see a few more minutes of McKennie deeper downfield. I'm into that as a setup. I just don't know 100% if Pochettino's going to be into that.
Yeah, and at the same time, like McKinney, I think in a more advanced position, it suits him better because he can be a little bit more slack. He can be a little bit more loose in his positioning because he doesn't have to be on the ball and sharp in it, because if he turns it over, there's no one behind him. So moving him deeper, I think it's an interesting test to see if he can have that kind of versatility and variety we've come to expect from him at Juve. And with the fitness, I think is capable of doing it. I kind of like him having just that little bit more freedom to try stuff.
Yeah.
And that might be a one-touch pass in behind for Balogun. I think you mentioned that previously, but I thought his one-touch passing was sharp. I thought his hold-up play in particular was stronger than I expected, especially given that he slimmed down. I think that he is still holding off defenders in smart ways where he'll like carry the ball into the half space, but then drop it back to a runner who's advancing out of midfield, and now he's kind of opened up space with that hold-up play and then also laid off well, but he still kind of has some good individual carries. I really liked this game from Weston McKennie in the end.
And to add to that, McKennie talked post-game with the TNT crew about how he's dropped weight, and it seems pretty clear when you look at him. This was Doug McIntyre's reporting that ahead of the Copa America in the summer of 24, McKennie comes in and is just not fit. Like he's overweight, and that was a problem for him, and it was an irritant to a lot of his teammates and the coaching staff. McKennie looks trimmer now. He looks a little bit more energetic. I think that's a really
less snacks.
Yeah, he talked about it. Like, I'm not snacking as much, and when I am, I'm doing healthy snacks. I'm running a lot. Like,
I think I was eating a bowl of chips as I read that and was like, yes, me too.
Yeah,
me too, Weston.
Yeah, Wes, we're alike, dude. You and me. Our habits are the same in every way. I think that's a really positive development for him, and I think we saw it play out a little bit in this game with some of his energy. So I think Weston McKennie is a really useful part of this team. I just don't know exactly where he fits in Poch's eyes in terms of is he a starting player or not, frankly. Because Tillman was very good in this game. I have been hesitant to praise Malik Tillman much ever, I think, basically. He was conducting a ton of play down that left side. The U.S. primarily built down that left side in this game, especially in the first half where they created a decent number of chances. And Tillman was the architect of a lot of those looks in that left half space. I was really impressed by him. To sort of zoom out from Tillman.
Can I stay on Tillman for a second, though? Because there were moments in this game when there's a little bit more Dempsey in him than I thought there was. I did not know he had any Clint Dempsey in him. And there's just moments where he gets kicked or fouled or pushed over, and he gets up mad a couple of those times, but he doesn't get up like, and then he's off his game. Not the Dempsey tearing up the referee's book or anything like that, but just more so they're like, okay, that's the game we're going to play. Okay, let's do this. And you could just see him respond to that physicality with even better play and more precision in his play, but then also getting stuck in and also kind of knocking people around a little bit. I liked that when the physicality increased, he matched that with his level of kind of intent, but then also still played some smart passes, didn't become overly focused on the physical side of the game to the point where he lost focus on the creative side of the game. And so adding that little bit of spice in made me extra happy in a game when I also thought he was just more reliable and more creative and more willing to try stuff than a lot of other attacking players. So a very strong performance from me. Very much liked what I saw from Malik Tillman.
Yeah, totally agree. And that extended to set pieces. And this is sort of a more macro point that I want to make. I kind of poked fun at Christian Pulisic already for this. But Tillman created legit chances for the U.S. on dead balls. And Richards deserves credit for this as well because he has been a set-piece monster and continues to be that. But 6 minute, Tillman's taking a corner kick. Good ball to Richards. The U.S. get a shot off of that moment. You get another one.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joe. I just have to say, like, I apologize, but he has the one where it drops in, it bounces, like, at the back post inside the 6-yard box, and I think maybe ends up going out for a goal kick or maybe gets headed clear for another corner by Ecuador. But I just, for all the world in that moment, thought the U.S. players were like, wait, someone can put them into the box? Like, well, okay, we'll start making runs now. Sorry, we weren't aware. Like, it was just such a, like, night and day difference of it landed exactly where it needed to be and just no one was there. And from that moment on, there started to be a lot more effectiveness from those set pieces.
Yeah, it was so real from Malik Tillman in this game. And the other one that I really liked is the Chris Richards shot in the 26th minute that comes with another Tillman set piece into the box. I mean, it was consistently good service from Malik Tillman. And the contrast when Christian Pulisic comes on the field, it's immediate. Like, immediately he's off his set pieces, Malik Tillman, and Christian Pulisic is on them. Like, obviously Christian Pulisic is the primary set piece taker for this team. I think that is such a hindrance. I think that is such a waste of his talent, of everybody's talent on the field. It basically eliminates the amount of danger you can create from dead balls. And the U.S., a team that, Taylor, this is where we agree, they do not have any total game-changing, consistently reliable attacking players in the way that many other national teams do. Boy, it'd be nice to be able to rely on set pieces as a revenue stream when you have a clearly very aerially dominant center back in Chris Richards. I like that in this game, that we saw it, and I didn't like that it went away. That's one thing. The other thing, quickly, when we're talked a lot about the on-ball stuff for the U.S. in this game. Defensively, I thought the U.S.'s press was better than it has been for most of Pochettino's tenure. Where think about Ecuador on the ball in this match, they didn't create a whole lot of chances that weren't from their own high-pressing sequences or weren't from their own quick transitions from their own half into the attacking half, right? The goal comes from Valencia. It is a quick attacking transition that starts in Ecuador's half. They create some looks early on off of set pieces. I think it's Alcivar maybe who has that shot early on in this game off of a corner. And they create some of those corner kicks off of high press, where the U.S. didn't do a fantastic job of building out of the back and dealing with that pressure. But really, the U.S.'s high press wasn't a liability in this game. And that's refreshing because it has been for most of Pochettino's tenure. Now, it wasn't against Japan, and it wasn't in this game. It seems to me that a common thread between those two matches, even though the defensive shape was different, where in the Japan game it was a pure back three on both sides of the ball. In this game, it was that 4-4-2 defensive that we talked about. It seems like a common thread between those games is that the U.S. pressed in a much more man-oriented fashion in both games, where that simplifies the defensive assignments for these U.S. players, where they really struggle with that, especially against South Korea. They struggle with that against Panama back in March, and that leads to the Poch meltdown and the program teardown. And now we're seeing these U.S. players go more man-to-man, and it seems like they understand their assignments much better. Now, Ecuador are not going to be a team that always tries to build from the back like Spain. They are going to be more willing to go vertically, but Ecuador did sort of make some attempts to build out in this game, and they were at least trying to figure out if there was a way through, and they ended up playing long quite a few times. The U.S.'s more defensive personnel could take care of those balls and restart U.S. attacking sequences from there, and really Ecuador just did not have a lot of joy when it came to playing through the U.S.'s press. I think that's a huge positive because that has been a game-losing approach for the U.S. for most of Pochettino's tenure. Like, the press has been so bad for so much of his time in charge of this U.S. team, and it's been quite good in the last two games. And that is a huge positive. Credit to Poch for adjusting some things there, and credit to the players as well.
We don't want to go too long on this review, but I do have one more individual I want to discuss. Joe, I need to talk Max Arfsten for a
Please
moment,
do.
if you will.
Please do.
Because I feel like he's one who we've just sort of landed on as, yep, he's a Poch guy. He's going to be in the squad. Maybe he'll be a starter if Jedi can't play. If Jedi can play, he's probably on the bench. And that is still very much the case. But watching him last night, I have a new appreciation for Max Arfsten. I really like him. I really I see what Pochettino sees in him. Because I've been trying to find a way to explain this, the way he passes when they are in the final third. And in the end, the best way I can put it, and Joe, you're more of a basketball guy than I, so you can correct me here. It's like his passes are all sort of lobs. And in soccer, that would be bad because that would mean he's chipping the ball up in the air and playing hospital balls. But all I mean is that he gives whomever he's passing the ball to, especially in attacking spaces, just slack to cook. And then if they want to, they can. And if they don't, they can pass it back to him. And he always makes himself available. But there's a looseness to his passing in the best possible way, where it's hit in such a way that the attacker can sort of turn under pressure. They can lay it off. They can flick it up to themselves. They can dummy it. There's a way he passes the ball that invites creativity from his teammates, but then also he is there for the simple drop pass if need be. But he'll match the style and tempo as well. When Pulisic comes on, there's a moment when Pulisic does 2 step overs and nothing really happens, and he kind of tries to drive the end line and it's not there, and so he cuts it back to Arfsten, and Arfsten immediately does 2 step overs, and it was just such oh, we're doing step overs? Cool, all right, I'm ready, let's do it. And I really enjoy that if it's time to try some stuff in the attack, Arfsten is game for it, but if it's time to kind of do what's been asked of him, he's going to do that too. And I fully understand now why Pochettino is very much all in on Max Arfsten. So too am I, and not, unlike Graham, just because of the way he looks.
Right. It's not just that he's stupid sexy for Taylor.
Yes,
there's some meat on the bone. Take notes, Graham. I thought Arfsten was quiet and mediocre for most of this game, and then excellent to close out the game. I thought he had 2 really nice balls in behind for Haji Wright, who comes on for Balogun to close out this match. 83rd minute, a lovely slip ball in behind for Wright. 88th minute, a similar pass on that left side. Arfsten can be an attacking difference maker. That is very clear. The thing is, I think so far for his U.S. tenure, we haven't seen enough of those moments where he has been that level of difference maker and is doing the fun stuff that you described. We haven't seen quite enough of that to compensate for the fact that defensively he can struggle. But I thought in this game he was largely fine. Like, he was quiet for most of the match until the end, where I think he made up for it and then some, and defensively didn't get exposed over and over and over again. That's fine. Like, if Max Arfsten's going to be the backup left back to Jedi Robinson, I've seen enough at this stage to be totally fine with that, Taylor. There were good moments in this game. He deserves credit for that, even if it wasn't a consistently dominant display from Arfsten by any means. I don't think anybody was expecting that, and that's completely fine.
Any other final notes, Joe? Individual, team, what you'd like to see against Australia?
Just one more note on Tim Ream. I thought he and Aiden Morris made Chris Richards' life very difficult on the goal that Ecuador scored in this match. Morris gambles high up the field to win the ball, or higher up the field than the center backs anyway, to win the ball, misses it. I think that read was a bad one from Morris. And then Ream is caught fairly high off of Richards, and so Ream is just taken out of the play because he doesn't have the speed to get back. So he gives Richards nothing. And then Richards, maybe should do a little bit better on Valencia there. It's a lovely first touch from Valencia. And Richards does a good job even after that to force them fairly wide. It's a delightful finish as well from Enter Valencia. But I didn't think Ream brought a whole lot in this game, to be totally honest. That is condition normal, as far as I'm concerned, for Tim Ream, where he is still the number 2 center back because he gives you at least a little bit on the ball, and because nobody else is taking that spot from him. Mark McKenzie comes on the field in this game, immediately gives the ball away, like seconds after getting on the field, and gives up a shot to Ecuador. I mean, nobody has made their case to replace Tim Ream truly in this U.S. team, so we will continue to live in sort of center back mediocrity. I have no problem seeing Ream against Australia because, honestly, who else do I want to see? I don't care. I mean, there's just nobody. There's nobody.
I like Tim Ream. I think he's fine.
I'm glad.
But I'm with you, especially with you on that first touch by Enter Valencia for the goal. It is such a veteran striker move because he knows where the ball is going, as he's receiving it, and so he is pretty clearly in my mind watching Chris Richards and seeing the way he shapes up, and I think recognizing that in transition where Richards has been trying to kind of cover that space because Ream is forward, that he is now Richards sliding over to be goal side of Valencia, and I think Valencia spots that because of that, his momentum is taking him one way. I'm going to take this touch back across him in a way that he does not expect, and now there's going to be chaos, and that's exactly how that plays out. And you're totally right. Richards even then is able to close that gap and force him wide. It's just a brilliant finish. It's perfect from him. You could argue maybe Fries doesn't have his feet set as quickly as he needs to and isn't able to make as much of a play, but it's just a great goal from Eder Valencia. And there are some individual moments therein from the U.S., but I want to give praise to Valencia versus too much blame to the U.S., but I think your point about Morris gambling and Ream being too high are probably pretty valid at the same time. Joe, any other wrinkles or experimentation you would like to see from the U.S. against Australia? You're right. It probably won't be Pulisic. It probably won't be Jedi. I would love to see one or both of them get the start, but that doesn't feel entirely likely. Zendejas missing this game fully has me thinking he's probably also not going to be involved, or at the very least that involved.
Yeah, he's been sent home, Alex Zendejas, so we will not see him
so
against Australia.
Won't be involved then. Cool.
I'm going to save my lineup, Taylor, for Monday's show. That's just how I am. I'm just going to be cheeky like that. Little tease.
I like it. I like that tease. All right, join us on Monday when we preview that Australia game. Get Graham's and Ryan's thoughts on this performance and have a few more thoughts about the Ecuador draw/win. For now, Joe Lowry, thank you for taking time on this Saturday morning, a very early Saturday morning for you, to talk about all things USA-Ecuador.
Taylor, it is a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Listeners, thank you all very much as well. We very much appreciate you all tuning in on the weekend. Go USA, boo Ecuador, but also yay Ecuador. And we'll talk to you again on Monday.